The first drone doesn't scare you. The 10th one doesn't either. What scares you is the moment they stop behaving like separate machines and start moving like one creature with a single nervous system. You can almost feel it through the screen, dots tightening into a pattern, angles correcting, timing syncing, like a school of fish that suddenly turns into a spear. And that's when you realize you're not fighting aircraft, you're fighting a conversation. The ocean air is cold and salty, the deck vibrates under your boots, and the CIC is a cave of blue light and quiet panic. Headsets, beeps, whispers. Hands hovering over switches like they're defusing a bomb. Someone says, "Targets multiplying." Someone else says, "Too many." You could fire. You could light up the sky. But every missile you launch is a second you don't have, and every radar pulse is a lighthouse beam screaming, "Here I am," into the dark. So the order comes out sharp, almost unreal. Going dark, not because you're helpless, because you're hunting. In the next 30 seconds, this becomes a knife fight in a pitch-black room. The winner isn't the one with the bigger blade. It's the one who controls the blindfold. Because you don't shoot the drones first. You shoot their eyes. You shoot their ears. You shoot the invisible thread between them. One burst of noise can turn a smart swarm into confused singles, wandering like drunk bees until they drop into the sea. But one perfect lie can do something worse. It can keep the swarm organized, just organized by you. A false GPS whisper, a fake home coordinate, a phantom ship that exists only inside their sensors. And if you win that lie, those drones won't just fall out of the sky. They'll fly the wrong way. They'll hunt the wrong target. They'll obey the wrong master. Tonight, we're going inside the invisible weapon that beats drones, electronic warfare, and the brutal reason it sometimes fails, right when you need it most. This is signal war. This is link cut. This is the moment modern combat stops being about steel and becomes about truth. A drone swarm looks like chaos, but it runs on order. Think of it like a marching band. Each player is small, but the music only works if everyone hears the same beat at the same time. Break the beat, and the band doesn't fight harder. It falls apart into noise. That beat is timing signals, navigation references, shared targeting cues, collision avoidance, and tiny status updates that keep the swarm from turning into a mid-air car crash. Most people imagine autonomous means no link. In reality, autonomy usually means less talking, not zero talking. Many swarms still need something external. GPS for positioning, a data link for mission edits, a relay drone for coordination, a controller for target confirmation, or a satellite hop for beyond line-of-sight control. Even when a drone can keep flying alone, the swarm behavior, the part that makes it scary, often depends on shared information. The swarm brain is not inside one drone, it's in the network between them. That's why warships don't only build defenses that shoot objects, they build defenses that attack relationships. Missiles are for bodies. Electronic warfare is for bonds. If you can interrupt the swarm's group chat, you can force every drone into lonely decision-making. And lonely decision-making is slow, uncertain, and easy to predict, especially under pressure, with fuel ticking down and sensors half blind. But here's the trap. Every time you transmit to jam, you're also shining a flashlight in a dark forest. You might stop the swarm, but you also reveal your presence, your direction, maybe even your identity. EW is not a clean on-off shield. It's a trade. You buy time with emissions. You buy confusion with risk. And the moment you forget that, the swarm doesn't need to beat your missiles. It only needs to find your silence and surround it. So before we talk about jammers and spoofers, lock this into your head. A swarm is a conversation. Win the conversation, and you win the fight without firing a shot. Lose it, and you can fire every shot you have and still drown in math. Electronic warfare sounds like a lab subject. Antennas, waveforms, frequencies. But at street level, it's simple. You either block the truth, or you replace it. In a drone swarm attack, both can be lethal. The drones don't need fear. They only need information. So you attack information the way you'd attack oxygen in a fire. Starve it, poison it, or blow it away. First is jamming, the blunt instrument. Imagine trying to hear a friend in a crowded club while someone holds a megaphone next to your ear. The message still exists, but it can't reach you. Data links become static. Telemetry becomes broken syllables. The swarm loses its rhythm. Some drones switch to lost link behavior. Some try to climb above the noise. Some start guessing. And guessing is where mistakes happen. Missed waypoints, broken formations, collisions, wasted fuel, dead batteries. Second is spoofing, the elegant knife. Instead of shouting over the truth, you imitate it perfectly. A fake GPS signal that nudges position a little, then a lot. A counterfeit command packet that sounds like it came from the real controller. A false target that appears more important than the real ship. Spoofing doesn't create chaos. It creates obedience to the wrong reality. Third is deception, the stage magic. You don't just hide the ship. You manufacture ghosts, phantom emitters, decoy radars, fake formations, electronic mirrors that make one ship look like three, or make the carrier look like empty ocean. If jamming is cutting a phone line, deception is answering the call and pretending to be someone else. And in a swarm fight, this becomes brutal. You don't need to defeat every drone. You just need to corrupt the swarm's shared truth long enough for your defenses to pick them off in pieces. That's why this episode isn't about missiles. It's about perception, because perception is the steering wheel of modern weapons. Going dark sounds like cowardice until you understand the geometry of detection. In open ocean, a ship is a metal island on a flat mirror. If you light up your radar, you're not just seeing farther, you're announcing yourself farther. Your signal doesn't stop at the horizon. It bounces. It leaks. It gets collected by receivers you'll never see. You're not just a ship anymore. You're a beacon. So a carrier group often plays a strange game. See without being seen. That's where passive sensors, emission control, and smart positioning matter. Silence becomes a weapon. It forces the enemy to work harder, to get closer, to take risks. In a drone swarm scenario, that matters because close is where drones become deadly. Short reaction windows, saturation, confusion, split-second decisions. But going dark doesn't mean you do nothing. It means you choose when to speak. Think of the spectrum like a crowded highway at night. If you drive with high beams, everyone can see you from miles away. If you drive with lights off, you might crash unless you have night vision and a map. Warships try to build that night vision. Data from other platforms, aircraft, satellites, passive detection, and brief controlled emissions, short flashes instead of constant shouting. Here's the retention twist. The swarm can force you to break silence. It can push you into a moment where you must transmit to defend, and the instant you do, you become targetable. That's why EW is often timed like a punch. Short, violent bursts at the exact moment they hurt most. Not constant noise. A sudden blindfold. A sudden shove. A sudden missing stare in the enemy's mental map. So when we say going dark, what we really mean is, I'm not gone. I'm baiting you into the wrong picture of reality. And if the swarm is smart, it will try to paint that picture back. If drones are the muscles, the data link is the bloodstream. Cut it, and the body doesn't instantly drop, but it gets weak, clumsy, and slow. Every swarm needs some way to share information. Target updates, spacing, roles, health status, and don't crash into your teammate. The more advanced the swarm, the more it behaves like a sports team calling plays mid-game. Some swarms rely heavily on a controller, one brain issuing instructions to many bodies. Others use a leader-follower model, one or a few smart drones guiding the rest. Others are mesh networks. Each drone relays info to neighbors like a rumor spreading through a crowd. Mesh networks are resilient, but they have a weakness. They require constant local communication. And local communication is jammable, spoofable, and analyzable. A warship can attack those arteries in multiple ways: flood the channel with interference, jam the handshake protocols, corrupt timing sync, or force drones to hop frequencies until they waste precious seconds reconnecting. In a saturation attack, seconds are oxygen. If you steal 10 seconds, you might save a ship. But there's a terrifying reality. The more you jam, the more you create a noisy environment where your own communications struggle too. It's like setting off smoke grenades in a room. You blind the enemy, but you also blind yourself. That's why modern EW isn't just power, it's precision, shaping the environment so the enemy loses coherence while your side retains it. So the question becomes, how do you cut their link without cutting yours? And how do you keep the swarm from switching to autonomy mode and continuing anyway? That's the chess match inside the noise. Jamming is brute force, and that's both its strength and its weakness. When it works, it's like pulling the plug on the enemy's brain. Suddenly, their video feed freezes, their command channel breaks, and their swarm loses rhythm. Drones start behaving like individuals again, each one trying to remember what it was supposed to do without the group. But here's why jamming sometimes fails. The enemy isn't dumb. They can design drones to expect interference. Frequency hopping, spread spectrum signals, redundant channels, directional antennas, preloaded mission plans, and fallback behaviors all reduce the impact of noise. If the swarm was briefed to attack a box area with onboard target recognition, it may not need a constant link. If it only needs a link for fine control, it can keep going on rough control. Also, jamming is physics. Power fades with distance. Sea spray, weather, and terrain can shape the signal. And a moving fight means the geometry changes every second. If the jammer isn't positioned right, it's like trying to cover a stadium with a flashlight from miles away. You can light up one section, but others stay dark. A swarm can exploit that by attacking from multiple angles, forcing you to spread your jamming power thin. Then there's the tell. Jammers can announce you. A strong jammer is like a siren in the spectrum. Easy to detect, easy to triangulate, and potentially a target itself. In a major conflict, jammers become high-value targets. The enemy may send drones specifically to find and kill the jammer source. So, you're not just defending, you're inviting a knife to your throat. That's why the best EW isn't loud forever. It's loud exactly when it matters, the moment the swarm needs coordination most, during role assignment, terminal guidance, and last-second retasking. If jamming is a blackout, spoofing is a fake sunrise. It's not about denying information. It's about giving information that is almost right. Right enough to be trusted, wrong enough to be fatal. The most dangerous lies aren't absurd. They're familiar. They sound like the operator's voice. They look like the GPS constellation. They match expected patterns. And that's why spoofing can defeat systems designed to survive jamming. Imagine a drone navigating by GPS, like a hiker using a map and a compass. Jamming is ripping the map away. Spoofing is handing them a map with one street shifted. At first, everything feels correct. The hiker keeps walking confidently until they realize they're in the wrong neighborhood with no idea when the mistake started. Spoofing attacks trust. And once trust breaks, even correct data feels suspicious. In a swarm, spoofing can be catastrophic because errors compound. If one drone believes it is here, it broadcasts its position to neighbors. Neighbors adjust formation based on that lie. Suddenly, spacing collapses. Collision avoidance triggers. Roles misalign. The swarm becomes a tangled knot of drones, correcting for a reality that doesn't exist. Spoofing can also create phantom targets. A drone seeker might be guided toward a decoy signature that looks like the carrier's radar return, or toward a false infrared hotspot. In the worst case, you don't just mislead drones, you harvest them, drawing them into kill zones where guns and missiles can pick them off in predictable lanes. But spoofing is hard. You must understand the signal format, timing, and authentication. It's not just broadcast fake stuff. It's broadcast fake stuff that passes the enemy's lie detectors. And in the arms race, Both sides keep upgrading those lie detectors. A swarm doesn't break evenly. It breaks at specific stress points, moments where it must coordinate tightly. Think of a highway convoy. If everyone drives loosely, they can survive chaos. But when the convoy must merge into one lane at high speed, one bad signal causes a pileup. Swarms have the same merge points: launch and assembly, role assignment, mid-course updates, and terminal attack. During assembly, drones need timing. They need to find neighbors, avoid collisions, and form a pattern. EW here can stop the swarm before it becomes a swarm, turning it into a cloud of lonely flyers. During role assignment, drones share who is decoy, who is seeker, who is striker. If you disrupt that, the swarm can waste its best drones in the wrong roles, like using your quarterback to carry water. Mid-course is where spoofing shines. Drones are far enough that the attacker needs to correct them, but close enough that errors matter. If you can nudge navigation and heading early, you can create huge misses later. A 1-degree lie at long range becomes a mile of error at the end. Terminal attack is the panic window. The swarm needs last-second coordination. Who attacks which target? Who distracts defenses? Who dives first? If you cut the link here, drones can still be dangerous, but they lose the choreography that makes them overwhelming. And choreography is what saturates defenses. Without choreography, you get individual threats instead of a synchronized avalanche. So the warship's EW plan isn't random. It's timed like a boxer's combination. Feint early, jab during assembly, hook during role assignment, and uppercut in terminal. The entire goal is not stop every drone. The goal is break the swarm brain at the exact moment it needs to think. The nightmare scenario isn't that drones fall out of the sky. That's the good outcome. The nightmare is that they stay flying, stay coordinated, and you only realize too late that their coordination is no longer controlled by the people who launched them. Because EW isn't just defense, it's potential capture. If you can imitate commands, you can redirect behavior. If you can redirect behavior, you can force a swarm to burn fuel in circles, to chase decoys, to attack empty water, or to return home along a path you choose. In some cases, you can even use drones as scouts, accidentally providing the defender with the attacker's sensor picture because the attacker's network is leaking like a radio station. That's why militaries treat data links like vault doors. They use encryption, authentication, frequency hopping, and layered protocols, because the moment your link becomes predictable, it becomes exploitable. A drone swarm that relies on cheap commercial components might be powerful, but it might also be hackable in ways that turn it into a liability. Picture the sensory horror. The swarm is closing. You hear the alarms. You taste the metallic dryness of adrenaline. And then suddenly the icons on the screen drift. The formation loosens. Some drones peel away. The threat doesn't end with an explosion. It ends with confusion. A quiet, eerie quiet. Like a crowd that suddenly stops chanting because someone cut the microphone. And then you ask the question every commander fears. Did we blind them, or did we just make them unpredictable? Because unpredictable is sometimes worse than coordinated. Coordinated can be modeled. Unpredictable can slip through. We talk about land, sea, and air, but modern combat has a fourth arena, the electromagnetic spectrum. It's the ocean you swim in without realizing. Wi-Fi, radar, GPS, radio, satellite links. You can't see it, but you can feel it when it's gone, like oxygen disappearing from a room. Warships live in this ocean. Every system depends on it. Sensors, targeting, communications, coordination with aircraft, coordination with escorts, threat warnings, guidance updates. And drone swarms live in it too. That's why the spectrum fight is not support. It's the opening move. It decides who gets to see first, decide first, and shoot first. Think of it like two people playing chess, except one player is allowed to remove the other player's pieces from the board without touching them, just by confusing their eyes. That's what EW does. It changes the other side's perception of the board. Suddenly, the queen looks like a pawn. Suddenly, the opponent thinks a square is empty when it's not. The best EW doesn't just hide you. It makes the enemy move into losing positions willingly. But it cuts both ways. When you unleash heavy EW, you also stir the water you swim in. Friendly sensors can suffer. Friendly comms can get messy. Your own picture can degrade. So there's an art. How do you blind them more than you blind yourself? That art becomes the heartbeat of naval survival in the drone age. And here's another rehook. The more the attacker relies on cheap drones, the more they can afford to lose. Meaning they can keep pushing until your EW plan runs out of options, power, or patience. If you can't blast radar all day, how do you see the swarm coming? This is where passive detection becomes gold. Instead of sending signals out, you listen. You hunt the drone's emissions. Control links, video downlinks, telemetry, even accidental electronic noise. Every transmitter is a fingerprint. Every protocol has a rhythm, and rhythm can be tracked. It's like being in a dark house and hearing footsteps upstairs. You can't see the person, but you can locate them by sound. Except in the spectrum, sound is radio energy. Ships use electronic support measures to pick up these whispers, estimate direction, and build a threat picture without screaming their own position. This matters because the best moment to use EW is early, before the swarm reaches terminal range. If you wait until the drones are on top of you, you're jamming in a panic, and panic is sloppy. Early EW can break assembly. Mid-range EW can bend navigation. Only last-ditch EW tries to stop terminal guidance. But passive detection is imperfect. The attacker can use low probability of intercept techniques, burst transmissions, tight beams, and minimal emissions. They can keep the swarm quiet until the last moment. And if the swarm is truly autonomous, it may emit almost nothing at all. Then, your passive tools are listening to silence. So naval EW becomes a game of cat and mouse, played in the dark. One side trying to whisper, the other side trying to hear the whisper. And when the whisper becomes a shout, when the attacker must coordinate, that's when the defender pounces. Drone swarms don't just try to hit you, they try to manipulate your defense. They want to force you into predictable behaviors. Light up radars, transmit more, fire more, burn more interceptors, reveal more patterns. They want your ship to become a machine that reacts the same way every time, because predictable defenses can be outsmarted. A saturation attack is like someone throwing sand into your eyes while they ask you to catch knives. You can catch a few, but every catch costs attention. Every attention shift is an opening. And EW is part of that sand. The attacker can jam you while you jam them. They can spoof your sensors with decoys. They can create false tracks so your weapons waste time on ghosts. So the defender must manage two resources: ammunition and clarity. Missiles are finite. Radar attention is finite. Human decision-making is finite. In the chaos, EW can be the difference between organized defense and random flailing. Because if you can degrade the swarm's coordination early, you reduce the number of simultaneous threats at the end. You turn an avalanche into a series of smaller rocks. But the swarm's plan may be exactly to withstand your EW long enough to push you into exhaustion, then hit with the real wave. That's why some attacks come in layers. Cheap decoys first, forcing you to transmit and fire. Then the real drones slip into the gaps created by your own reactions. So the central question becomes sharper. Is EW a shield, or is it bait? And can you tell the difference before it's too late? When jamming stops a swarm, it usually stops the swarm brain, not every drone. The drones might still fly, still move forward, still follow a preloaded path. But without the shared brain, they lose the ability to adapt. They can't retask. They can't coordinate. They can't swarm. They become a line of runners instead of a team. Jamming works best when the swarm is communication dependent, when drones need continuous updates from a controller, when mesh networking keeps spacing tight, or when terminal guidance requires shared targeting data. In those cases, Heavy interference can cause drones to drop out of formation, lose roles, collide, or trigger fail-safe behaviors like return to base or loiter. But jamming fails when drones are designed for degraded environments. Onboard navigation, inertial backups, vision-based targeting, pre-planned search patterns, and decentralized decision-making. If each drone can identify targets locally and commit without external permission, jamming becomes more like turning down their volume than removing their ears. They may not hear the conductor, but they can still follow a memorized song. Also, jamming can be defeated with smarter comms, frequency hopping, spread spectrum, stronger encryption, directional antennas, and short burst messaging. If the attacker needs only milliseconds of communication to synchronize, they can transmit in tiny flashes, harder to jam, harder to detect. And if your jammer is tuned wrong, you're punching air while the swarm slides through a different lane. So the answer is paradoxical. Jamming is powerful, but it's not magic. It's a tool that buys time, unless the enemy has already planned for the moment you try to blind them. Remember the layered defense idea. Long-range sensors and missiles, medium-range interceptors, close-in guns, decoys, countermeasures. Electronic warfare is a layer too, but it's a weird layer because it can affect all ranges at once. It can delay the swarm before it forms, corrupt it mid-flight, and degrade it in the final seconds. Think of EW like messing with an enemy's map while they're driving toward you. If you change the map early, they may never reach your street. If you change it late, they may still crash into your driveway. So ships want EW upstream, farther from the ship, where errors have time to grow and where the swarm still needs coordination. EW also supports kinetic defense by making targets easier. If spoofing breaks the swarm's formation, guns can track singles. If jamming forces drones to climb, they become visible to other sensors. If deception creates false corridors, you can funnel drones into areas covered by your best weapons. EW is not separate from missiles. It shapes the fight so missiles are used more efficiently. But the attacker knows this. They may use mixed swarms. Some drones silent and autonomous. Others noisy and link-dependent, forcing you to choose whether to jam the obvious ones, while the quiet ones slip closer. They may include EW-resistant drones, whose job is to keep the network alive under interference, flying higher, acting as relays, boosting signals, or simply sacrificing themselves to locate your jammer. So signal war becomes an arms race inside the larger battle, each side trying to shape the environment so the other side's best systems become clumsy. If you had to summarize EW in a single image, it's this: a blindfold being tied over a pilot's eyes mid-flight. Not because you destroyed the plane, because you destroyed the plane's relationship with reality. Drones are perfect victims of this because they are decision machines. No instincts, no gut. No, something feels off. Just inputs and outputs. A human operator can sometimes sense deception, a weird delay, a strange pattern, a mismatch between what they see and what they expect. A drone can't feel wrong. It only calculates. So if you can feed it wrong inputs that pass its checks, you can steer it like a puppet. That's why EW is often called an invisible weapon. There's no smoke trail, no crater, just a threat that evaporates because it was never seeing you correctly to begin with. In the best-case defense, EW turns drones into wasted effort. Fuel burns, batteries drain, guidance drifts. The attacker watches their swarm disappear into empty ocean, and they can't even prove why. There's no dramatic interception footage, just failure, silent failure. But in the worst case, EW becomes a mirror that reflects your own weaknesses. If you rely too heavily on jamming, you may reveal your omissions. If you rely too heavily on spoofing, you may fail when the attacker upgrades authentication. If you rely too heavily on silence, you may be forced to speak at the wrong moment. So yes, EW can beat drones, but only if it's treated like a craft, not a button. And that craft is what we're building, layer by layer, in this episode. Is less than #0. 5# is greater than. The moment defenders got better at jamming and spoofing, attackers started pushing a simple idea: remove the need for constant communication. If your swarm can operate with minimal link time, the defender's EW becomes less decisive. This is why autonomy is not just a buzzword, it's a countermeasure. An autonomous swarm can use onboard sensors to navigate, onboard vision to recognize silhouettes, onboard logic to assign roles, and local mesh updates only when necessary. That reduces the signature. It reduces vulnerability. It also reduces the defender's ability to reach into the swarm and manipulate it. But autonomy creates new weaknesses too. Autonomous systems still need references. Inertial navigation drifts. Vision can be fooled by decoys. And local decision-making can be exploited with bait. If you can't cut the link, you can still corrupt the senses. You can still create false shapes, false heat, false motion patterns. Deception doesn't die when comms die. It evolves. So the defender's job shifts. Instead of attacking the controller, you attack the drone's confidence in what it sees. You feed it a world where the carrier is not where it thinks, where decoys look more carrier than the carrier, where the sea itself becomes a mirror maze. That's why EW isn't just radios and noise. It's perception engineering. The attacker tries to make drones survive without hearing. The defender tries to make drones see wrong. And the moment both sides do this, the battle becomes less about firepower and more about who can manufacture the most believable reality under pressure. A carrier group is not a single ship. It's an ecosystem. Escorts, aircraft, satellites, sometimes submarines, sometimes allied sensors. The smartest going dark isn't total silence. It's distributed visibility. One platform emits while others stay quiet. Data is shared selectively, and the group tries to keep a picture without becoming a lighthouse. Imagine a group of hikers at night. Only one uses a flashlight at a time, and they take turns. Everyone else watches shadows, listens for movement, and stays hidden. That's the concept. Manage emissions like a scarce resource. Use short bursts. Use directional beams. Let aircraft with altitude see farther while ships remain quieter. This matters for swarms because the defender can create a trap. Allow the swarm to think it has found the carrier by detecting one emitter, when that emitter is actually an escort or a decoy. The swarm commits. It burns its best terminal guidance. It enters the wrong bubble. Then the carrier remains dark, while the escort group, prepared, turns the swarm into debris. But coordination is hard. Friendly forces must avoid jamming each other. They must avoid spoofing their own sensors. They must maintain trust in shared data. One mistake can create friendly confusion, which a swarm would love, because a confused defense is the easiest defense to saturate. So the defense becomes a symphony. Precise timing, disciplined emissions, and strict rules. Because the moment everyone improvises, the spectrum becomes a storm where nobody can tell signal from noise. Is less than #0. 5# is greater than. One of the most dangerous effects of EW is not blindness, it's disagreement. Radar says one thing, passive sensors say another. Optical says a third. Operators start arguing with machines. Machines start arguing with each other, and precious seconds bleed away. This is a human factor vulnerability. A swarm attack compresses time. You don't get to hold meetings. You don't get to debate. You must act. And EW tries to make action feel unsafe by making the world ambiguous. If you can make the defender hesitate, if you can make them question which track is real, you create openings for drones to slip through. Spoofing thrives in this environment because it doesn't need to fool every sensor. It only needs to create enough inconsistency that the defender's confidence collapses. And once confidence collapses, defenders start either freezing or overreacting, firing at ghosts, lighting up radars, wasting interceptors, revealing positions. The best defenses build procedures to handle this, prioritize certain sensors, use fusion algorithms, require confirmation thresholds, and train crews to recognize deception patterns. But training is never perfect, and the attacker only needs one messy moment. So the spectrum war is also a psychology war. You're not only attacking drones, You're attacking the defender's decision cycle. You're trying to make the other side lose faith in their own eyes. In military terms, winning often means completing the kill chain faster. Detect, track, target, engage, assess. Electronic warfare introduces an alternative, the lie chain. Detect the enemy's sensors. Understand their expectations. Insert believable falsehoods. Let them act on the falsehood. Then exploit the mistake. Against a swarm, the lie chain can be devastating. You don't have to destroy every drone. You just have to persuade enough of them to waste time, misassign roles, or commit to the wrong approach corridor. Once their timing breaks, your layered defense has breathing room. And breathing room is life. But the lie chain has a weakness. It often requires proximity, intelligence, and preparation. You must know what the enemy is listening for. You must know their protocols. You must anticipate their fallback modes. That means EW isn't just gear. It's planning, intelligence, and rehearsal. The better prepared side can win without firing. The less prepared side can jam and still lose. So this isn't a cool tech documentary. It's a survival lesson. The spectrum is a battlefield where preparation decides outcomes long before the first drone crosses the horizon. And here's the rehook. In a future war, the first casualty may not be a ship. It may be truth. The moment both sides can manufacture believable sensor realities faster than humans can verify them. Now, we hit the cliff edge. What happens when both sides use EW at the same time? You get a fog where every system is degraded. Drones lose links, ships lose clarity, missiles lose mid-course updates, and commanders must make decisions with incomplete pictures. This is where going dark becomes more than stealth. It becomes discipline, because the side that can function with less information, through training, procedures, redundancy, and calm, will outlast the side that needs perfect data. In a spectrum storm, the fragile side breaks first. And drone swarms are designed to exploit storms. They can keep pushing, keep probing, keep sacrificing cheap units until they find the seam. They can force you to stay in high alert until your crew's attention frays. They can create 1,000 tiny emergencies until one becomes fatal. So in the next act, we're going deeper. How ships harden their links, how they avoid self-jamming, how decoys and emissions create fake carriers, and why the most important EW move might be the one you never notice. Because it feels like nothing happened. Because in the signal war, the cleanest victory doesn't explode, it vanishes. The threat simply goes away. And the enemy never fully knows why. If you want to understand why EW sometimes fails, you need to understand what modern militaries learned the hard way. The first version of any weapon depends on clean conditions, and the second version is built to survive dirty ones. So drone swarms evolve the same way people do in a storm. They stop relying on one fragile umbrella and start layering raincoats. A hardened swarm doesn't use one data link. It uses multiple paths and multiple behaviors. It can hop frequencies, spread its signal like mist across a wide band, switch antennas, change waveforms, change timing, and keep transmissions short enough that jammers struggle to grab them. And the moment you add authentication, digital handshakes that prove the message's real spoofing, gets harder. Now the defender can't just shout noise and hope. They need precision. The right place, the right time, the right power, the right shape of interference. This is where the spectrum starts feeling like fencing in the dark. You don't swing wildly. You listen for the enemy's blade and touch it at the exact instant it commits. Because every swarm has to do something that reveals itself eventually. Coordinate, update, confirm, correct. And when it does, the defender tries to strike that heartbeat. Short bursts of jamming timed to role assignment. Short bursts timed to terminal retasking. Short bursts timed to the moment the drones are depending on shared truth the most. Think of it like cutting the music in a nightclub. People can still stand. They can still breathe. But the choreography, the thing that makes a crowd move like one organism, breaks instantly. That's what link cut really means. You're not trying to silence every drone forever. You're trying to steal the rhythm. At the one moment, rhythm matters. Some links don't shout, they whisper. Low probability of intercept and low probability of detection aren't magic cloaks, they're habits. Spread the signal. Keep it weak. Keep it directional. Transmit in tiny bursts. Make it hard to even notice you're talking, and harder to lock on to the direction you're talking from. For a defender, this is frustrating. It's like trying to stop a thief when you can't hear footsteps, only the faintest creak, the smallest change in air. You might know something is there, but you can't easily aim a jammer at what you can't confidently track. And for the swarm, it's a survival trick. If the ship can't hear our group chat, it can't crash our plan. But whispering has costs too. Weak signals can be fragile. Burst signals can miss updates. Directional beams require orientation and precision. And in a dynamic fight, salt spray, wind, motion, precision is never guaranteed. So swarms often settle into a compromise. Silence as long as possible, then quick flashes of coordination when needed. That's why an EW defense is designed like a trap, not like a wall. You don't try to block every inch of the spectrum all the time. You watch for the moment the swarm must speak louder when it must confirm targets, synchronize timing, or hand off guidance. Then you punch. A short, violent spike of interference, like slamming a door in the middle of a sentence. And if you time it right, the most advanced swarm in the world can briefly become the dumbest. A cloud of flying bodies without a shared brain, drifting toward the sea like ash. If you can't hide perfectly, you can mislead perfectly. Naval deception is older than missiles. Smoke, decoys, false formations, dummy radio traffic. Electronic deception is the modern version, except now you can build a ghost that exists inside sensors, not eyes. Imagine the swarm sees a carrier, not because it sees a hull, but because it detects a pattern, radar behavior, emissions, communications, rhythms, heat signatures, a fingerprint of modern war. If you can imitate that pattern, you can create a fake carrier, not a cardboard cutout, a believable digital apparition that the swarm's logic flags as the real prize. Then the attacker's smartest drones commit to the ghost. They burn fuel toward a lie. They spend their terminal guidance on empty water. They saturate defenses that aren't the carrier's defenses. It's like sending burglars to the wrong house by changing the street signs and turning on lights in an empty building. The burglars don't know they've been tricked because everything feels right. The address, the glow, the pattern of life. In a drone swarm fight, deception buys something priceless. Time. Time for interceptors to get into position. Time for guns to prepare. Time for the carrier to remain quiet, while escorts do the talking. And most importantly, time to force the swarm to split its mass. Because a swarm's greatest strength is numbers arriving together. If you can fragment it, pull half toward a ghost and half toward silence, you turn an avalanche into scattered rocks. This is the cruel elegance of EW. The most effective defense might not feel like defense at all. It feels like the enemy simply chose wrong. Here's the part nobody puts in the trailer. Electronic warfare can sabotage its own side. If jamming is smoke in a room, you can't choose who breathes it. You can degrade the enemy's links and degrade your own. You can confuse their navigation and confuse your own missiles' updates. You can flood the spectrum so badly that your own picture collapses into noise. This is why disciplined EW is a doctrine, not a gadget. Crews train on emission control the way firefighters train on oxygen. When to use it, when to conserve it, when to stop before you suffocate yourself. The danger zone is the panic moment, the instant the swarm is close and the urge is to turn everything on at maximum power. Radar full blast, jammers screaming, comms shouting, everyone talking over everyone. That moment feels powerful, and it can be a gift to the attacker. Because a swarm can exploit your noise. It can use it to home in. It can time its final wave for the instant your own systems are overstressed. It can push you into a spectrum storm where you are no longer a coordinated defense. You are a crowd yelling in the dark. So the best defenses build lanes inside the chaos. They segment frequencies. They schedule transmissions. They use short, controlled bursts. They designate who is allowed to speak and when. And sometimes the hardest tactical decision is the simplest. Don't jam yet. Because the most valuable moment to jam might be the one moment the swarm cannot adapt to losing the beat, right before the terminal dive, right before it assigns targets, right before it becomes unstoppable. If you jam too early, the enemy learns and adjusts. If you jam too late, you drown. EW is timing. If you think only ships jam drones, you're already behind. A swarm can carry its own small jammers, not to win the spectrum like a warship does, but to create local chaos at the worst moment, right when interceptors are guiding, right when guns are tracking, right when the defender needs clean sensor data. It's the same logic as throwing sand in someone's eyes while you punch. A few drones might exist purely as noisemakers. They climb higher, broadcast interference, soak attention, and force the defender into a dilemma. Do you waste precious shots on the jammers? Or do you suffer degraded tracking while the killers slip lower? This is where layered defense gets psychologically brutal. The defender wants a clean sequence. Detect, track, engage, kill. The swarm wants to destroy the sequence, turn it into overlapping emergencies. And when emergencies overlap, humans make mistakes. You fire at the wrong track. You delay too long. You waste a missile on a decoy. You light up a radar you meant to keep quiet. That's why in the drone age, winning is often about resilience rather than perfection. You won't have a clean picture. You won't get ideal ranges. You won't get calm. You'll get a fog of partial truths. So the real question becomes, can the defender still function when the spectrum becomes a screaming storm? Can they still execute a plan when every system is degraded and every sensor is arguing? Because swarms don't need to be smarter than you. They only need to make you messy. And in that mess, electronic warfare is both a weapon and a test. Can you control the chaos you create? Or does it control you? Going dark is not passive. It's a counterpunch disguised as restraint. When the ship reduces emissions, it forces the swarm to solve a harder problem. Find, identify, and commit without an obvious beacon. The swarm must get closer. It must rely more on onboard sensing. It must take more risk. And that's when the defender's timing window opens. Because close range compresses decision-making. The swarm needs rapid updates, micro-corrections, last-second retasking, collision avoidance, target confirmation. The conversation becomes louder, more frequent, more necessary. So the defender stays quiet until the swarm is dependent. Then the defender speaks once violently. A burst of jamming that hits the exact band the swarm needs for coordination. A deception pulse that injects a false bearing. A moment of spectral force that makes the swarm lose its rhythm right when rhythm is everything. It's like letting an opponent charge in a boxing ring, letting them build confidence, then stepping aside at the last inch, so their momentum becomes their own collapse. The best part is psychological. The attacker may not even know what happened. From their perspective, the swarm should have worked. The drones should have seen the target. The plan should have saturated defenses. But in the last seconds, the swarm misaims, splits, hesitates, collides, or commits to decoys, and the attacker is left staring at a failure that leaves no crater to analyze. That's why EW is so feared. It can erase outcomes without obvious evidence. It can make a brilliant attack look like incompetence. It can make a weak defense look like genius. And in war, perception becomes strategy, because every side studies what worked. If EW makes your opponent misread reality, you're not just winning today, you're shaping what they build tomorrow. Here's the next leap. The moment swarms start using onboard AI to adapt to EW in real time, the spectrum war turns into a duel of learning systems. The swarm doesn't just lose link. It tries to classify interference patterns, identify deception cues, and switch tactics automatically. The defender doesn't just Jam. It tries to predict the swarm's fallback behavior, bait it into predictable lanes, and shape the swarm's decisions like herding cattle with invisible fences. In that world, the battle feels less like shooting and more like competitive illusion-making. Two sides manufacturing realities for each other, each trying to get the other side to commit to the wrong truth. And the most terrifying part is speed. Machines react in milliseconds. Humans react in seconds. If the fight becomes AI decides first, then the human commander's job becomes simpler and scarier. Set constraints, set rules, and trust the machine not to hallucinate a war. Because deception doesn't only fool drones. It can fool your own automation too. A future defense might have automated threat prioritization, automated jamming schedules, automated decoy selection. If the attacker can feed that automation believable falsehoods, the defender can be tricked into wasting its best moves at the worst time without a human ever realizing until impact. So this lesson to learn becomes bigger than drones. EW is the front line of the war over truth in machine warfare. If your sensors can be manipulated, your decisions can be manipulated. If your decisions can be manipulated, your firepower becomes irrelevant. And in the next decade, the side that wins might not have the biggest missiles. It might have the best ability to keep reality stable under attack. So let's return to the opening image. A swarm approaching over black water. The ship's deck vibrating. The CIC lit in cold blue. Your mouth dry with adrenaline and salt. You can hear the alarms like a heartbeat. You can feel the tension in shoulders and jawlines. The air smells faintly of electronics and recycled oxygen. And outside, somewhere beyond the steel walls, tiny engines are cutting the night into pieces. In that moment, the instinct is to shoot, but the winning move is often to think like a thief, not like a brawler. Cut the link, poison the truth, make the swarm argue with itself. Make it chase ghosts. Make it waste its timing. Because a drone swarm's superpower is coordination, and electronic warfare is the weapon that attacks coordination directly. That's why words matter. Signal war, going dark, link cut. They're not hype. They're the 3 doors into the same room. Signal war, the invisible battlefield where truth is a weapon. Going dark, the discipline to stop being a beacon and start being a trap. Link cut, the moment you don't defeat the drones, you defeat the swarm brain. And here's the final twist. EW doesn't guarantee safety. It guarantees uncertainty on purpose. Sometimes it collapses a swarm into the sea like dead leaves. Sometimes it fails because the swarm learned to operate blind. Sometimes it creates unpredictable behavior that's even harder to stop. But one truth remains. In the drone age, the first casualty is often the sensor picture. The first battlefield is often the spectrum. And the first victory is often invisible. So the next time you hear drones versus warships, don't imagine bullets first. Imagine blindfolds. Imagine lies. Imagine silence. Because the side that controls what the machines believe controls where they fly, what they hit,